I first heard about Sri Aurobindo in the Golden Temple, the Sikh Golden Temple in Amritsar, India. I knew nothing about him at the time. I had traveled overland from England, leaving England in September 1969. Anyway, we traveled across to Calcutta, and then someone paid for us to travel by train to Pondicherry. And I stayed on in the ashram and also saw the mother. Which was a very significant experience for me. And it was a gradual growing awareness of someone who loved me totally and accepted me. Of course, at the time, I didn't know who she was. It's taken me a long time to realize the magnificence and the magnanimity of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. It's mostly through there. And that comes through every time I read the Savitri or things that Sri Aurobindo has written. And I was so privileged to be in the ashram. I worked in the dining room. I worked in the library. And after the mother passed, I actually went back to England for a while. I wasn't very well at that time. But I don't mean to say much more, but I did return again, and I went to Oroville, and I worked on the Matrimondia, which was also a very fulfilling experience. I mean, the point was I was pretty lost in England. I had some belief. I love nature. I love going out in the fields and walking in the woods and so on. And I believed in some sort of education to improve man's lot or society as it was. But it was a very shallow beliefs, really. It had no depth, it had no understanding of who I was or what humanity is or what the goal is. I didn't even know about reincarnation, so that I would have another chance, or that there's a progression. So Mother and Sri Aurobindo made this all real for me. And I'm just so grateful. It's an extraordinary journey. It's as though I've lived many lives in one life. I mean, that, these experiences come to us for our growth. And I hope now too that I am growing. I feel that nothing has stopped, that the relationship with the Mother and Sri Aurobindo is deepening, and also the connection with other people in the yoga, and that this is the time for it to spread out in the world and make a difference, because so many people are looking, and it's such a critical time.
Sri Aurobindo discovered me in a way that I found surprising and interesting. It was close to my birthday back in 1973. And I think it's interesting, especially the timing of that, because the mothers explained to us that our birthday is a time when we are particularly open to spiritual experience, to spiritual discovery. And so I was reading, I always had a subscription to the Washington Post at that time. And I opened it up on this Sunday afternoon, and there was amazingly a double-page spread about Sri Aurobindo and the Mother and about the ashram. And I think it came to be there because there was an American in the ashram who had a brother who wrote for the Washington Post. So that was just a wonderful coincidence. So I began reading the newspaper and discovering so much that really opened my consciousness in a way that had never happened before. It was really life transforming, just wonderful. I cannot put into words the experience of that time. It was just extraordinary for me. I had been a seeker for most of my childhood and early days, and I had never found anything that spoke to me so meaningfully as this did. So I was determined to go to the ashram, and I made some connections with people in the yoga in this country and planned a trip. And I went as soon as I could, and it was just simply life transforming. So regarding the effect it's had on my life, it's given me a whole different perspective and made my life much more meaningful and richer. It's even the challenges of life, the growth experiences that I have encountered, I find more meaningful to manage, because I can see things from the perspective that Sri Aurobindo and the Mother enlighten us about. And you can understand from that we're in an evolutionary progression, and that we're all evolving and changing. Not only are we all one, which is a wonderfully enlightening perspective for me to grasp. I had never understood that from Protestant Christianity. There may be much more richness there than I was exposed to. But when I was a young girl in the Methodist Church, almost everything was about stewardship. And this meant stewardship not of what the divine has given us so much as contributing to the church, tithing the 10%. And this just didn't hold out enough meaning for me. It might have been there, but I was not able to discover it. So it was Sri Aurobindo and the Mother coming to me in this context of the newspaper that really opened up all that world for me. I would like to say too that when I went to the ashram, I began a friendship with Amal Kiran, K.D. Sethna. And there's an interesting parallel between my discovery of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother and his, because he told me that once when he was a young man in Bombay, he bought a pair of shoes. I think they were sandals, and they came wrapped in a newspaper, which had information about Sri Aurobindo and the ashram. And that was life transforming for him. So I'm very grateful for this experience and for the opening of my consciousness, which has been possible and enabled only through their grace.
It was November 23rd, 1961. The next day was Darshan, and I saw Mother for the first time. Very shortly after that, she asked to see me, and I spent about 1 hour with her. She spoke to me a lot about music, and I've covered this in many other interviews. But her presence was so powerful and so strong. And she had written to Jyoti Priya saying, "Tell him he may come and stay as long as he likes." Well, just a few months were enough for me. I was much too restless for the peace of the ashram in those days. So I went back to America. Now, that was in 1962. And I began to work for Mother, do various things such as the handmade paper and other things. But in 1965, staying at my father's home, working with him, I fall into a deep sleep, and suddenly I meet Sri Aurobindo. He is in his home in the subtle physical. I had read something about it from Mother in her works. So regal, so beautiful. And he invites me to sit next to him. And he touches my chest, and his silver hairs fall between his fingers and touch me. And then he touches my solar plexus. And he speaks to me, and he says something like, what a fortunate fellow you are to realize all of your ambitions. And there was a little more, but I don't remember anymore. But the next night he comes again. And of course, I'm a very angry fellow. I see him walking with two people, and one of them is dead and one of them is alive. One of them is Nolini, and I think the other was Purani. And he looks at me and he says, what a look, very humorously. And I say to him, did you or did you not come to me last night? I'm very angry. And he says to me, I did, and then goes away. And those were my first two experiences with him. Our Mother has verified them, and Pavitra has written a letter to me saying more would come. But more with Sri Aurobindo is not so easy to come. But the last meeting I had with him was in 9/9/99. When again he was seated, this time in a chair, and he allowed me to come up to him, and there were no words. But he let me massage his feet. I asked Aurobindo Basu, what does this mean? He says it means that you have surrendered to him, but now you have to make the surrender more complete.